There comes a time when even sincerity gets tired, not because we've lost heart, but because it's learned to hide where it hasn't yet been hurt. After 50, we realize not everyone deserves to know our pain. Some stories just weren't meant for every ear. Have you ever trusted too much? Ever said how you felt and regretted it? Ever been silenced by someone who pretended to listen? Today, I want to have a chat with you about the kind of silence that doesn't hurt, the kind that protects, about choosing to stay quiet. Not out of fear, but self-respect. Stick with me till the end. Maybe this is the beginning of a new way to protect yourself without shutting yourself off. I thought being honest about everything was a way to connect. I'd speak of my pain, my failures, my vulnerabilities, like someone offering flowers, not knowing if the other person held thorns in their hands. And at first, it felt beautiful. People would say, "I admire your courage." But over time, I realized not everyone who listens truly understands, and not everyone who understands actually respects you. I began to notice some people keeping track of my flaws like debts, and later on, they'd use them against me, as if my past could somehow disqualify who I am today. Being transparent started to feel like a sentence, because the more I shared my truth, the more some pulled away. Others came closer, but with the wrong intentions. It's not easy to admit, but sometimes talking too much is like opening windows for those who only want to watch you fall. After 50, I've learned that real acceptance doesn't depend on how much you share. It depends on how much you honor yourself, even in silence. And now, when someone asks me something deeply personal, I take a deep breath and think, will this bring me closer to someone or just leave me exposed again? Because some pain isn't a secret, it's a scar, and only those who lived it know how much it costs to keep it closed. Trust is like old glass, fragile, full of history, and when it breaks, it cuts deeper into the one who gave it than the one who shattered it. I've trusted people who seemed to listen with their hearts, but later I realized some only listen to store ammunition they'll use when you least expect it, when you refuse to give in, when you choose to change, when you're simply not who you used to be. They look at you with a smug smile and say, "You're acting like this, but I know who you really are. Remember when you told me?" And in that instant, it all comes rushing back. The conversation, the sharing, the vulnerability. It hits like a slap out of nowhere, like they opened the box where you kept your heart, just to remind you how much it still bleeds. After 50, I realized not every listener is genuine. Some are strategic, some are just curious, and others silently dangerous. And you only see that when your pain is brought up, out of context, out loud, spoken coldly by someone you once called a friend. That taught me something. Being heard is not the same as being respected. And from that day on, I stopped explaining myself so much. Because the truth doesn't need to be proven. It needs to be protected. And there are parts of me that only I hold the key to. And that isn't selfishness. It's self-care. They say silence means consent. But after 50, I've learned that sometimes silence simply means survival. I used to explain everything, every decision, every change. Every silence was followed by a justification, as if I owed everyone a report on the state of my soul. But one day, it hit me. The more I explained myself, the less they understood. And it wasn't because I couldn't express myself. It was because some people only hear what confirms what they've already decided about you. And talking in those moments just wears you down. I traded words for silence, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Because when you go quiet, you start to really hear what you're feeling. You stop asking for permission to exist. And you start listening to yourself more than you ever did to others. And slowly, the silence that once felt like abandonment became shelter. A shelter where I could cry without being interrupted, where I could think without being judged, where I reconnected with myself, away from everyone else's noise. The world demands explanations, even for your pain. But after 50, I've learned that some pain can't be explained. It can only be respected. And silence, when chosen, is one of the strongest acts of self-love there is, because protecting yourself is also a way of staying whole. And when we're whole, we suffer less. I wasn't born suspicious. I learned to be. Every time I shared something intimate and saw it used against me, every time I opened my heart, hoping to be embraced, and was corrected instead, people say, speak up, vent, trust more. But no one tells you the world doesn't always have ears. Sometimes it just collects other people's weaknesses. I've been the one who exposed my pain hoping for comfort, and found judgment instead. I've shared scars it took me years to accept, and saw people laugh or twist my story as if it were ammunition to belittle me. That's when I realized, not everyone deserves the map to your soul, because those who don't understand your pain will use it against you. And it's not always out of cruelty. Sometimes it's just ignorance, ego, or an inability to handle someone else's truth. The trouble is, we only learn that after we've been hurt, after trusting too much, after leaning on someone who was never going to hold us. And then we blame ourselves. I was naive. I gave too much. But the truth is, it wasn't stupidity. It was hope. Hope of being accepted completely. The illusion that someone would see you with no filters and still stay. That hope hurts. But it also teaches. And today, if I seem quieter, it's because I've learned that some stories only survive if kept in silence. Because once something's been shared and turned into a weapon, it can never again be your protection. For a long time, I believed speaking up was a sign of strength. Say what you feel. Don't bottle things up. Be transparent. But no one teaches you the difference between expressing and exposing yourself. Today, after 50, I see it differently. Silence is also an act of self-love. I no longer need to explain every pain just to be understood, nor justify myself to fit into anyone else's expectations. Sometimes silence is the only way not to bleed in public. They've called me cold, distant, but no one knows how many times. I stayed quiet to avoid screaming, distanced myself to avoid hurting, kept things to myself. Not out of pride, but because I realized those who truly listen hear you even when all you do is take a deep breath. The rest, they just want access. That's why now I choose where I place my voice. And more importantly, I choose where I don't. Because I have nothing to prove to anyone. And if I'm going to speak, let it be to someone who deserves to hear it. Someone who won't turn my pain into a weapon or my victories into envy. I've learned that silence isn't absence. It's selective presence. If you've made it this far, maybe you've lived this yourself. You trusted someone, opened up too much, and then felt exposed, vulnerable, maybe even ashamed. But I want to tell you something, calmly and from the heart. You didn't do wrong by trusting. You just loved with a depth the world has forgotten. And loving like that is rare. That's why the pain came. But now, maybe it's time to protect that love a little more, to keep it for yourself, to filter, to choose. After 50, we've come to understand that not every hug is a safe place. And keeping what's intimate doesn't mean being cold. It means being whole. So next time you feel the urge to tell everything, remember, not everyone is ready to listen with their heart. And you deserve to be heard like that. Thank you for being here. Now, tell me in the comments, what's the greatest lesson life has taught you about staying silent? And if this message spoke to you, may it also speak to someone who needs it. Share it with care, but share it. Because sometimes the silence in a video is exactly what someone else needed to hear. Thank you, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.